Hey, my loves. Welcome back to Wish I Knew, the podcast where we talk about how to build a life and career that you truly love. We are back with another solo episode today. I am so excited to catch up with you all. I feel like it's been a whirlwind Q1. How are we already in Q2? So we're going to do a little bit of a life update, and then we're going to go into a Q&A. And today's Q&A is a real focus on career dilemmas. I feel like the start of Q2 is when everyone starts to sort of take their reflections and their pain points and then starts to think about taking some action. And so I feel like just generally the chat that I'm hearing at the moment is very much like people are starting to question things and starting to take action. So we put a little call out on Instagram and had so many questions in. So I'm so excited to get into that with all of you. Now, before we get into it, just a quick heads up that we are nearly at the end of season 1. I don't know how that's happened and gone so fast. So first of all, huge thank you to anyone who has listened, subscribed, liked, shown us any form of support. It really means the world. This is my first time doing this. So honestly, I'm so grateful for it. And also to all the guests who have taken the time to come and hang out with me and chat with me on the show. So yeah, we have got big plans in store for the next season. If you're not already subscribing, please take the time to do that. It takes you 2 seconds. It's free. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow on our socials, but also on Spotify. Give us a review, give us some comments. If you have any suggestions of themes or topics you want more of, guests that you love to see, please let us know because it really helps to shape the future of this show. So huge thank you and more to come. And so it is officially Q2. We are out of Q1. I feel like we're feeling the spring vibes. Everyone's got a bit more of a pep in their step. The weather's been great, or at least brighter, not necessarily warmer in the UK, that is. I had all these big ambitions for Q1 and for 2026. And I feel like some of them I've definitely given some time and some focus to, but I definitely haven't been this superwoman that I set out to be at the beginning of the year. It didn't help that I actually got ill at the beginning of the year for like 2 months straight. So I couldn't actually physically do a lot of things, but I'm feeling better. I'm back on track. I'm going to use April as my reset month. I saw something somewhere about taking April out to like go quiet, reset, and basically set yourself up for the rest of the year. I feel like it's the perfect month to do that because not that much goes on. So I am going to be doing that. I'm focusing on my goals. I'm going to be doing some proper goal setting, focusing on my health, which has been a big thing that's kind of fallen away side, and really just get back on track. So that's my focus. And if you're feeling the same, I would definitely urge yourself to think about what could a reset look like for you right now. I actually just started working with a coach, which is something that I've never really properly done before, but always been curious about. And I've already started to see with that how it's opened my mind up to things that are so simple and so straightforward, but just helping me take that next step on my path. And one of the things that I really learned about actually today was the fact that you can't do 100% of everything. And so going into every new year, I feel like we always say we're going to do the gym, we're going to work out 4 times a week, we're going to eat really healthy and cut out carbs or whatever it might be. We're going to be on it with work, we're going to read a book a week, but actually the reality is you can't take on all of those new changes to your lifestyle at once. And so something that I was talking through with my coach was that I basically analyzed every area of my life and like where things are and where things need to be. But actually, there's usually just 1 or 2 really important priority ones that kind of prop all the other ones up. And so I recognized what those were. And then now now I understand that I need to then focus on those moving forward. So that's been a huge shift for me. I feel like I have had all these different feelings about work and podcasts, and I'm spinning loads of plates at once, which is amazing in so many ways. But for someone like me, it also can be really overwhelming. So I'm definitely excited to be having this reset and trying to get back on the right path and then prioritize the right things at the right moments. So yeah, if you're thinking about feeling lost or feeling stuck or feeling like you're overwhelmed, I would really urge you to think about what's that one thing that you could change or you could focus on that would then snowball into everything else. And we had our first ever live recording at Advertising Week Europe, which is insane. If you haven't heard of Advertising Week, it's one of the biggest and most prestigious advertising events. They had all these insane speakers, from Tiny Temper to Louise Redknapp to Daniel Sturridge to Graham Norton to Charlotte Crosby. Who else did they have this year? They had so many people. Patricia Bright, love Patricia, as well as some of the smartest minds in marketing and media that there is. So it was a real privilege, and it was a bit of a sort of full circle 360 moment. I ran into Riyadh, who is one of my guests on the show. If you haven't checked out his episode, go watch it. It's insane. He is so open and vulnerable. I definitely shed a few tears throughout that, and it's just a really, really nice interview. And he is the sweetest person ever with the most interesting story. Ran into him there, and we had a little 360 moment because we met at that same event like 4 years ago. And I said to him, I want to do a podcast and you need to come on. So that was a really special moment to be there and to be back with people and out and about. And so many people came up and very complimentary of the podcast, which was amazing. And the live show was so good. So it was the first one we've ever done. We had an amazing guest who is Abigail Foster. She is a chartered accountant and a personal finance expert. She is so intelligent, but she also just breaks down finance in a way that makes it feel fun and cool and accessible. And as someone who is really like honest about the fact that I am terrible at math and terrible when it comes to finances, it was really reassuring to hear the way that she was speaking about things. And I had so much feedback from the audience saying that her session was really useful and it was a really great reminder of a lot of different things. One of the key topics that I took away was this concept of the FU money pot. So every woman or every person should have this FU money pot, which people call a freedom fund. You know, they call it savings or emergency pot. But she was saying it's in the sense of it could be if you're on a date and you want to leave and you need to get a taxi home so you're safe. Or if it could be as extreme as you're on holiday with your friends and you don't want to be there anymore, or something happens and you need to get home and you have the cash to be able to do that. Or it could be that you're dealing with a toxic boss at work and you don't want to have to deal with them anymore and you want to be able to comfortably leave and make a decision and you're not relying on that job for your livelihood. And so that was definitely something that I took away. A lot of other people took away, of the sense of you need to build up this FU money pot to be able to feel secure and also take actions from a place of what you actually want and desire in life. And it was just so great to have a live audience. We had so many people. We were on one of the main stages. I was a little bit nervous, to be honest, because although I do a lot of live shows and public speaking, and I've done a lot of conferences, this was all kind of confirmed quite last minute, as sometimes these things are. And I was nervous. It was one of those like situations where I was like, oh God, is anyone going to come? But we had a great turnout, great energy in the room, really great questions and things like that. So it was just a really, really nice moment. And it's actually given me a lot of confidence in the fact that I think we could do some more live shows. So if you have any suggestions for guests that you would want to see or hear from live, please let me know, because I love nothing more than getting great people together in a room and connecting other people. So I think that a live show is definitely something that's going to be on the cards very soon. And something else I've been thinking about lately, I mentioned earlier, I've been out and about a bit more. It sounded a bit like we just come out of COVID, but more in the sense of I think I sort of was hibernating a little bit earlier this year and throughout the winter to like just get my head down. And then I'm now sort of starting to come out and be, that little social butterfly again. I've had a few nights out with the girls, which has been so much fun. Honestly, if you're stuck in a rut or feeling a bit crappy, there is nothing better than a night out with the girls and the gays. And I've had so many fun nights over the last month or so. One the other week, I had like one of my oldest girlfriends. We went for dinner. We caught up, first time in ages. Another friend of mine was in town. She dropped in. Another one of my friends was on a date in the same venue. All of us kind of like got together at some point throughout the night and then had this girls' night, and it was just so much fun. So I'm feeling way better for getting out and about and being a little bit more social again, as well as focusing on, my goals and all that sort of stuff. I also was doing a lot of International Women's Day talks, and that was really great to be a part of. I can't believe that Women's Month is already done. I feel like it just comes around so quickly every single year. I got to go to Exeter University, which was really, really special. I never went to university, as you probably heard before. And whenever I do a university talk, it always feels like a real surreal moment because I'm in a room full of people that I feel like I can really connect with and relate to in lots of senses. But also I just find it quite ironic because I didn't study at university. So that was really great. I also did a talk with a brilliant talent agency called Connect Management, and I met this amazing woman called Deborah Joseph, who is it's an editor. She used to edit magazines. She worked at Glamour magazine and was their chief editor in chief for a really long time, and she's just so smart and inspiring. And we actually had this great dynamic in this talk where there's 20 years between us, but we had so many commonalities when it came to certain points of our career, and also different perspectives of different parts of the industry and things that we'd experienced as well. So that was really great to see. And it's just great to be out and connecting with other women who think like you and want to learn and want to grow. Hi, my loves. Just a quick pause to say if you're enjoying Wish I Knew, please, please, please hit the subscribe button and leave a quick rating or review. It really makes such a difference to the show and helps us to keep bringing you amazing guests and stories. Now, let's get back to the episode. And something else I've been thinking about a lot lately is this concept of success by osmosis. And I think I originally heard this in some sort of Gary Vee video. He keeps coming up in my feed at the moment lately. And he was talking about actually specifically people going back into the office and the fact that by osmosis and being around other people and your peers in the same environment, you're more likely to learn and absorb and grow together collectively and learn from each other. And that's something that's really difficult to do remotely, especially for younger people earlier in their careers, new hires. It's really, really difficult to get that kind of sharing and learning remotely. So that's something he was talking about. But I've been thinking about it a lot more in the sense of for my own sense of goals and where I'm at in terms of how can you put yourself in the environments and the rooms and around the tables with the types of people who you want to learn from and who are doing the things that you want to be doing as well. And I really felt that. I went to an event, a breakfast event a little while ago, and it was one of those weeks where I was just having a hellish work week. I was like, I can't justify taking a Friday morning out. It was like a 3-hour event. But I was like, do you know what? I'm going to feel better if I go. And I went and I had the best time. And I sat next to someone who I'd wanted to talk to for ages and met so many incredible women, saw some familiar faces. And it was just a really great reminder that you are always just that one decision away from a good mood or something good happening. And the girl that I sat next to at this event then invited me to a lunch with some other female founders. And at this lunch, it was so inspiring because I was surrounded by these people who a lot of them are doing the types of stuff that I want to be doing. Or they're all female founders and they are running their businesses. They're talking about their team structures, how they're developing apps. I think 3 of them had all written books and they were talking about their experiences and how long it took and which publishers they used. And it just made me think that everyone needs to be around the types of people that they can grow with or grow and learn from. And that's not to say that your friendship groups have to be that table. Your friendship groups can and probably should be completely outside of your industry and outside of work. But if you want to achieve big things, surrounding yourself with people who are doing those things in a really nice and, not necessarily a strategic or transactional way, but just in a sense of commonalities of where you want to go. And it's made me realize that throughout my life, I've had different chapters and phases. And I feel like I'm entering this new phase now where I need that different sense of a support group around me. And so I'm kind of more intentionally going out there and building that myself. So that's just a little something to take away and think about. And moving into career dilemmas and having a bit of a Q&A with you guys. We had so many great questions, so let's get straight into it. The first one is such a good one. I've just been made redundant and want to go freelance. Where do I even start? First of all, breathe. Redundancy is tough and you should give yourself some grace. So I really hope that you're taking some time, even if it's a week, a couple of weeks, a month, to like just reset after that, because it can really be something that can knock your confidence massively. But you have to remember that it's a reset and it's not a rejection. It's actually sometimes, and I feel like most often for people, it seems to be the biggest blessing in disguise. So I hope that you're feeling positive and ready. And it's so exciting that you're going into freelance. I think that where you should start is thinking about what's your core service offering that you want to pitch out to people. And so one of the things that I probably struggled the most with when I first started working for myself was really clearly explaining what my offering was to people, because I didn't quite know. So I'd say sort of in the early stages, definitely think about what are your like top 3 things that you can do for people, and how can you really simplify that so that people really understand what you can do, or what's your core focus area that you can focus on. That'd be where I would start. Personally, I didn't come up with like a company name or anything like that. I just did it all in my own name for ease. So you don't necessarily have to come up with a company wrapper unless you've already got a great idea. So don't stress about that too much. Some of the things that I would say I prioritized too early on were things like building a website, having great assets, getting headshots done. Like I think all of that stuff is really useful, but actually going and speaking up to your network and announcing that you're going freelance is probably the biggest thing that you can do. So I would go and do a post on LinkedIn. I would reach out to people. I would grab coffees with people. And I think, especially in moments like this, it can be really difficult to ask people for help or for guidance or for direction. But you'd be surprised at how many people will genuinely come and support you in any way. You know, it could be referrals, it could just be advice, it could be that they become a client. So I would go and speak to as many people as possible and just get yourself out there and have fun with it. The other thing I'd say is get really clear on what your day rates are going to be when it comes to how much you need to earn. There's a great website called SalaryBot, I believe, where you can basically go in and calculate what's the amount that you want to earn on an annual basis, and then what would your daily equivalent rate be based on how many days a week you want to work, for example. So I would go and look at that and think about what day rate do you want. There are a lot of freelance recruiters that are great to talk to as well around like where does the average day rate sit in market. And so speak to other people and see where that kind of sits with other people, because there's pros and cons to having different day rates. So I've definitely noticed that having a higher day rate is great for shorter term projects, but then for longer term projects, people often want to go that little bit lower or sort of go to more of a manageable place. So think about where you're going to sit for short term projects, longer term projects, how many days a week do you want to work, all of these types of things. There's tons of resources online, but it's a really exciting time. And I think the biggest thing I would say from an advice perspective is just be really ruthless with your time. And I saw it was actually Nicola Gumby, who was on the podcast recently. She did a post the other day that said, I quit my 9 to 5 to work 24/7. And I feel like that is so true, especially when you're freelance. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but the freedom and the autonomy is so worth it. So I'm very excited for you and hope some of that helps. Okay, number 2, this is a bit of a spicy one. My boss keeps taking credit for my work. How do I manage upwards without blowing it up? I mean, that is a tricky one. I'll be honest with you though, when it comes to your visibility, it is your responsibility. So, as harsh as that sounds, it's true in the sense of like, you need to take ownership of speaking up for yourself. You need to be the person that's promoting your work internally and externally. And if your boss is doing that, then they're essentially doing what you should be doing, and they're just promoting the work. So I would take a step back. I think in these situations, it's always so easy to take it really personally, but often these things aren't personal. It's just a case of your boss has got goals, your boss wants to present this amazing work externally or internally. And they're not necessarily thinking, I'm taking credit for this person's work. They're thinking, how can I promote this? Because this ultimately makes me look good, which you should be doing the exact same of. So what I would think about is in future going forwards, how can you have like clear paper trails? How can you promote your work more visibly internally? I would actually go to your boss and say that you're really keen to do something like, for example, a wrap-up email at the end of every project that gets shared to everyone internally in the business, and you can credit and mention everyone that's been a part of that project, and use that as a way of building your own brand and your own name in the business. So I do think when it comes to visibility, promoting yourself, think about what you can do internally before you go externally, and then make sure that externally, where possible, you can share your own work and you take that initiative to go and do that and do it quickly. I would do it as soon as that project's wrapped up or as soon as you've achieved that goal and you can talk about it, go and post about it, because there's only a limited time window when you can do those things. And it's actually one of the things that I regret not doing enough of when I worked agency side and I had loads of client projects all the time. I didn't go and share those externally enough. And I feel like I really should have done, because it's just great to show the great work that you're doing externally, because no one knows if you don't promote it. And the other thing I would add to that as well is think about, when is it worth addressing it with this person directly versus going a little bit around it. So is it worth having a one-to-one conversation and then explaining to your boss that perhaps maybe not accusing them of taking credit for your work, but saying, hey, I'd really love to be credited or mentioned in future, da 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 da. Or could you go around it, which I think would be my preferred route, and speak to your boss, but say, hey, I'm looking to promote more of our work, or I really want to get, our work out there. What I'd love to do is take that off you. And at the end of every project cycle, whatever it might be, I'm going to take it upon myself to go and do a report or wrap up email or whatever it might be, and credit everyone and tag everyone. Are you okay with me taking responsibility and ownership of that? So I think that you can go and basically put yourself forward in a way that your boss is thinking you're taking something off their plate, but actually it's you just being in control of that narrative. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope I've taken the question in the right way. But ultimately, I think sometimes you have to help people help people in a way that you're taking something off their plate and you're not adding something to it, and you're not causing conflict or direct kind of confrontation in that sense. You're just looking to help and work together, not work against each other. Because ultimately, you could end up in a cycle where you're constantly kind of competing with your boss, and you don't want to be caught up in that. One thing I didn't fully appreciate before running my own business was just how much mental energy everyday decisions take. When you're spinning a lot of different plates and always thinking a few steps ahead, even the small things can start to feel surprisingly draining. After leaving corporate to set up my business last year, I realized if I wanted to stay focused and make good decisions consistently, I needed to simplify wherever I could, especially when it came to my health. When it comes to supplements though, I've always really struggled with consistency, mostly because I felt so overwhelmed by having to take so many different ones. That's why I've been using Heights Vitals as part of my new daily routine. I wake up, get ready, take 2 capsules, and that's literally it. Vitals combines 20 essential vitamins, nutrients, and minerals, which would normally mean taking around 14 different supplements, but it's all in one simple formula, supporting both your brain and your body health. For me, it's helped me to stay focused on long days, keep my energy nice and steady throughout the week, and it's massively improved my sleep, which makes a real difference to how I think and show up every day. I also really value how flexible it is. You can take it with or without food, and at any time of day, which really matters when your routine isn't always predictable. Even if I forget it in the morning, I know I can still take it later and stay consistent. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Vitals is backed by hundreds of scientific studies and has been developed alongside leading experts. So if you're looking for a simple way to support your focus, energy, and overall health as you work towards your own goals, you can check out Heights in the link below in the show notes. And you can use the code WishIKnew20 for 20% off in your first month. That's WishIKnew20 for 20% off your first month. I hope you love it just as much as I do. Number 3, I'm in my late 30s, I have kids, and I feel like I've fallen behind. Is it too late to pivot? I mean, behind for whose timeline would be my first question. Whose timeline are you on? Everyone is on a different timeline. I can totally see why this is a really common feeling. I think especially after people take time out of work when they're having their children to then coming back into the workplace, it can feel like you're stepping backwards or not progressing because you've missed out on time. From what I hear from other people, you will never regret taking that time out with your kids and spending that time with them. I think when it comes to overall in your life, though, I would take a macro zoom out and think about what is important for you in this next chapter. Is it that you really want to accelerate in your career? How can you do that? What are going to be the pros and cons? What are going to be the forfeits that you might need to make in terms of having additional childcare to help step in, or will you be able to work from home, or will you have to be in the office every day? I'd think about those types of things logistically that are going to help you. But ultimately, everyone's on a completely different timeline. We had Joe Good on here who was talking about the fact that she's never been as booked and busy as she is at 71. So there is literally no age limit or no ceiling or no limit to how late or early you can start anything in your career. So I think, just start to think about, what do you want from this next chapter? If you really want to accelerate, and if it's going to mean that you're going to have to forfeit some things at home, or you're going to have to work long hours or work in a different way, how can you logistically be able to do that? And remind yourself of the amazing successes that you have had and have got, because the older I get, the more I realize that everyone is on such a unique and different path. I've got friends who are in their 40s and don't have kids. I've got friends who don't want children. I've got friends who do have children and are going back to work. I've had friends who are business owners, had children, never took time off, and regret that. So I think everyone is on a completely different trajectory and path, and there is abundant opportunities for everyone. So taking a little bit of time out to have kids is an amazing thing, and you should be so proud of yourself for that. And don't worry too much about what that means in your overall path or trajectory based on your age. Also, don't get caught up in a trap of comparing yourself to people of other ages. I feel like we all compare ourselves with our direct peers in terms of age, and I just don't think that's ever a really healthy thing. I think social media doesn't help that either. We're seeing like 21-year-old influencers who are making millions and being CEOs, and that's great, but that's not everyone's timeline, and that's not everyone's life. And that's probably not the case for 99% of the population. So we've got to be a little bit realistic and think about, where can we get positive influences from as well? So are there people that you can either speak to in your network that have been through similar things and are doing something great that you want to go and almost like aspire to learn from? Or are they even people that you can follow, that you can relate to? Maybe it's someone who's had children around a similar age or has a similar number of children, and then they've gone back into the workplace, or they're doing XYZ. I would just think about, how can you bring those really positive influences into your life in a way that's really productive and healthy for you. I hope that helps. Okay, next one. How do I grow my network when I don't know where to start? That is such a good one, because I think growing your network is something that has to be done intentionally, but then also organically at the same time. I think that it just starts with just showing up. The best way to build your network, whether it's your network in your job, or whether it's making friends, or whether it's going out to events, just showing up is the number one thing that you need to remind yourself to do, because it's always the way with networking events or whatever it might be that you get invited to, the day comes around and you think, oh my God, like I've had such a long day at work. I don't want to do this. I'm so tired. You might feel ill. You always feel better if you go. And if you go, you can always leave. So I would just start showing up to places, find interesting events that you can go to. There is literally, depending on where you are in the world, if you're near a city, there is literally an abundance of events that you can always go to at any given time. Just start showing up and start showing up in different communities. If it's not going to things physically online, there are so many different events and communities. I would basically take a proactive, not reactive approach to going out there, speaking to people, both online, both in real life, and following up with people as well. So following up is the biggest thing that's going to get you to be remembered by someone. So I would, for example, if you went to an event and you met 3 people and had conversations with them and exchanged details or their LinkedIn or whatever it might be, follow up the next day. Don't wait any longer than that. Even if you're not asking for anything or you feel like you're not adding any value just yet, just say, hey, it was really lovely to talk to you. I enjoyed talking to you about XYZ. Hopefully we can cross paths again in the future or something like that, or if you actually genuinely want to continue on and, learn something from them or connect over something, you can ask them for a coffee or whatever it might be. But you might not need that just yet. But doing that is really what will take you from being someone that they once spoke to briefly at an event to a name that they can recall and remember because it's in their mind the next day. And then the next time that you go in and you might need something in the future or you want to ask something or you have something to offer them, they'll remember you. And so I've been really interested in this sort of compound interest kind of theory or method that applies to so many areas of our lives recently. And networking is definitely something that builds over time, and it definitely is something that develops with a compound interest approach. So what I mean by that is you can start with just going to an event once, speaking to a few people. Then you go to another event, you speak to a few people. You might meet someone who invites you to another event. And then it just starts to build over time. What you might also notice if you start going to similar types of things or similar industries or people of a similar kind of interest to you, you'll probably start to cross over with different people, and then your network just starts to build and build and build. So it's definitely not a short-term thing, but I think the first step is just putting yourself out there. My number one tip when it comes to networking as well, it's really not easy, but to always go on your own to these types of events. And the reason why I say that is because, first of all, I feel like it's a real confidence booster to go to something like that on your own. I think it's also like a bit of a not power move, but people will see you as being someone who's really confident. Like, oh, she's turned up here on her own. She looks really confident and she's going and chatting to people. I think it's something that builds a lot of confidence for you, but also gives you that perception to other people. But also you're way more likely to speak to other people if you're on your own than if you're with someone else or a group of people. Because often whenever I've been to an event with a group of people, we end up speaking to one another and we don't end up networking or speaking to other people externally. So I would say that is my number one tip. Always try and go on your own because you're literally putting yourself out of your comfort zone and you're more likely to go and speak to other people. Okay, next question. I want to move into tech, but I have no idea where to start. This is such a good question. I feel like a lot of people have these similar thoughts of wanting to move industries, but don't necessarily know how. The first thing I'd say is, what transferable skills have you got? So if you literally looked at your CV or your job description, what transferable skills could you take to any other industry? Let's ignore tech for now. And I'd almost print them out and highlight them so that you can start to get a feel for what area you're in and then how can you go and navigate that pivot into the next thing. And so, for example, as a practical example for me, when I was pivoting industries, I worked in sales. So I wanted to take my experience from what I was in at the time, which was finance, and then move into the creative space. So I moved into the creative space from a sales perspective. What I also did, and what I'd always encourage to do, is something extracurricular that can add to that industry. So if it's tech, for example, are there courses you can do? Are there communities that you can be a part of? Are there things that you can teach yourself? Could you go to hackathons? Could you teach yourself to code? Depends what side of tech you want to go into. But if you have something that's a direct benefit to being in that industry that you are proactively going and seeking out and doing, it's going to help add context and color and just that additional richness to your CV that is going to set you apart from someone who potentially has got all the experience but maybe hasn't got the passion. So I think about what extra things could you be doing right now that don't stop you from working, that will help you to navigate that transition. The other thing is ask people for coffee, like literally just go and speak to people that are in that field and say, hey, I'm looking to get into this field. What advice would you give to someone like me? You'd be surprised the amount of people that would be willing to do that if you just buy them a cup of coffee for 20 minutes. And the final thing I would say is start to assess like qualifications versus experience and where are you at in your career right now? And is there anything that's potentially missing? Like, do you need additional qualifications? Like, for example, if you want to go into an engineering role, but you're currently, I don't know, an accountant, it's going to be a little bit difficult to make that transition without going and taking those additional steps yourself. So I think you've got to think about what area of tech do you want to get into? And then how can you realistically step into that in a way that you can pivot and then navigate upwards? And it might be a case that it's a 5-year path. You know, it might be that you do a sidestep in wherever you are now. And then once you get in the door, you then create this kind of path to where you want to get to. But ultimately, it's notoriously difficult to get into tech businesses. But the tech industry is very vast, it's very wide. So don't necessarily just put your hopes up on one company or one segment of it, for example. Okay, this one's quite a good one. My manager says a pay rise isn't on the table. What else can I negotiate for? I feel like this is such an interesting conversation and topic because I feel like when we're told we can't get a pay rise, we almost just think like, that's it. That's the end of where we're at. But actually, there's so much more beyond pay that you can always negotiate for in your role. So I really, really like this one. So I would start with almost writing down to yourself a bit of a shopping list of like, what are the additional things that I think would be really valuable to me, either in my life or my career right now. So that could be things like more flexible working hours. It could be a bonus that's maybe performance related or whatever it might be. It could be shares if you work in a company where that is a potential option. It could be navigating to understand where you are on the path to a promotion. So typically, if a pay rise isn't available, depending on the company and the sector, but from my experience, a lot of the time that's been that you're maybe at the top of your sort of bracket for where you're at right now, but you need to step up into a new one. So you almost need to be in a new bracket to be able to get a pay rise, and you almost need a promotion to like trigger that. So I would think about what is that next step in that promotion? Like, is there a possibility for you to be working at a more senior level? Someone once told me very early on that in order to justify even asking for a promotion, you need to be doing that job beforehand. So think about like, if I'm a manager and I want to get to senior manager, what do I need to do above and beyond what I'm doing currently that's not just nailing my job? Like being really good at your job is probably 80% of it. The additional 20 is what's going to take you to the next level and what's going to make it a no-brainer for your bosses. So I would think about that, write down what you want. Are there any additional things that you can do? Additional responsibilities? Is there anything else in terms of bonus, shares, those types of things? Could you have additional resource? So is there someone that you need to hire in the team or you want to hire? Is there a particular area of what you do that you want to take on additional responsibilities for? Like, for example, is there an events or marketing part or need that's not being fulfilled at the moment that you could then take on as part of your remit and responsibility in order to grow? Another thing that's really interesting is also budgets for things like learning and development. So, is there a course that you want to do that they would be able to pay for? Think about other things beyond just your pay at the end of the month. But I would also take everything into account with the fact that you need to understand why is there not a pay rise available at the moment, and how do you get there with a clear path. And I would really make that quite clear with your boss as well of, okay, you say that it's not a no, but is it a no or is it a not right now? And if it's a not right now, what can we get to agree to in terms of a timeline? And I'd get that in writing. Get it in writing, follow up on email, always document everything, um, and then do the work in between, or agree on what's required of you in between to be able to get to that part. I hope that's helpful. I started my podcast here at Cube in The Frame, their flagship podcast studio, and it changed the game for me. With my membership, I work alongside a professional production team, so it looks polished and sounds incredible as soon as the cameras start rolling. They also have smaller self-service podcast studios with different set options, so you can choose the vibe that fits you. Membership here starts from £145 a month. If you've been thinking about launching a podcast, visit thecube.com or click the link in the show notes below. Oh, this one's really good. I can actually relate to this in some of my previous corporate roles. So I'm an individual contributor. How do I get visibility with senior leaders? So for anyone that's not in the kind of tech world, it's a very common phrase that they use, but IC, individual contributor, is basically someone who has a sole remit, but isn't necessarily managing a team. So you could still be really senior, but you basically are responsible for your remit on your own. And you're not a dedicated manager. And so that can be tricky because often these IC roles, you're kind of over here floating off, working on your own a lot of the time, and maybe you're not exposed to all of the team dynamics, or you're not contributing to some of the bigger projects, but the stuff that you're doing is still really meaningful. I would think about, like, first of all, where are the senior leaders that you need visibility with? Is it the fact that you need more visibility on email, Slack, on calls? Is it face to face? Like, who are those people? I would sort of just pinpoint them out yourself, first of all. And then I think about, like, what's the path of least resistance to be able to subtly get visibility without being too obvious. In the sense of, like, is it a case that at the end of everything that you do, or if you wrap up a big project or you deliver something, could you send an email to that leader to say, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up on XYZ. I was able to fix XYZ and the result was this. I thought that you might find this useful. Granted, I would maybe sense check with your direct line manager, like, is this something that's relevant and interesting to this particular leader? So I think about things like that, where it's quite easy for you to just get your name out there. And that's the thing, especially if you're working for a big global business, it can be difficult if you're not all in the same country or same place. So even just getting your name out there is something that's really important. The second thing I would do is try and speak up on calls. So ask questions, give feedback. Don't be afraid to put your hand up. Even if you don't know something, don't be afraid to speak out. And also put your sort of hat in the ring to be able to promote certain things. So whatever your remit is, can you put yourself forward to be pitching or presenting on this call? Even if it's not actually your remit, it might be that you have a big monthly team update and you do a birthday shout out. Like, could you take ownership of that shout out? Sometimes it's just getting your name out there and your face in front of people that just starts to get the ball rolling in terms of who is this person and what kind of impact are they having. And then the other thing I would say with it is something that builds over time, but equally, don't dismiss the need for face-to-face relationships. And so something I've always been a big advocate of is just say hello to these people, especially senior leaders in big organizations. I think people can almost be like, oh my God, that's so-and-so, and they're so senior, they'll never know who I am. Just say hi. Go up to them and say hi and say, my name's Emily and I work in the social department. This is what I do. Just make them familiar with you. And that power of face-to-face beats anything else. If you ever do anything like all team get-togethers or all team offsites, make sure that you get some time to be able to sit with that person or speak to them. That's something I've always been a big fan of. There was actually one offsite that I went to once that was in the US, and a really senior, like the top person of our organization, was sat at the front for this particular thing that we were doing, and no one was sat next to him. So, and I came in, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go sit next to him. I actually didn't think anything of it at the time because I was like, that's a free seat. But that actually meant that through some of the workshops and sort of exercises that we were doing, we ended up talking to one another about certain things. And I got to introduce myself formally to him and say, hey, I'm Emily, this is what I do. And then he in turn was super interested in certain aspects of what I was doing and the role, and was really intrigued to ask specific questions. So I think you'd be surprised that those small interactions can have such a meaningful impact when it comes to building rapport, and getting those senior leaders to know who you are and know what you do. So yeah, think about promoting your work, getting face to face with people, putting yourself out there. And if you're not currently getting visibility, you've got to take ownership of going and doing that, no matter how big or small you think that might be. Okay, and final question. This is pay rise related again. I think pay is on everyone's mind at the moment. How do I navigate a pay rise negotiation? And what if they say no? So, God, I could talk about this all day long. I won't, but I could. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to remember that it's not about how long you've been at a company and whether you feel like you deserve a pay rise. You have to think about what's the impact that you're delivering. Are you delivering above and beyond your role? And ultimately, what is the business case for them to put this investment into you? It's all about the business case. Something someone told me once, which I've always taken with me, and I've used this in practice, and it's really, really effective, is to go out to market and understand what your market rate is worth. So if you are at manager level at the moment and you're being paid, I'm just going to say round figures for round figures' sake, 50K. And in market, you could go and get another job elsewhere and be paid 60K. That is one point of data that you want to take and you want to store. So you need a document where you're documenting all of this. But I would go and look at 2, 3, 4, 5 data points to see in market, is there an average salary that's happening that's at your level that's not meeting where you're at right now? Because that is great data to go and take into them. So I think that's something that's really useful. It's also great as a sense check for you in terms of where are you in your stage of your career? Are you where you should be? Are you below? Are you above? Like, it's just a really good sense check. And I think especially when we've been in roles or companies for quite a long period of time, we don't do that. We do our job, but we get quite internal, we get quite insular. We think about where we are right now, but we don't really look out to see, well, if I was to go somewhere else, am I going to be getting paid more? And if you are, then I think that that's something that you need to take to your employer as part of this business case. It's not the whole case. That's the point. It's not the whole argument, but it's a really strong reference point for them to understand where they sit. And then second of all, I would prepare this business case to make it so compelling that they can't say no. And the way I would do that is noting down your achievements and accomplishments alongside the impact that they've had on the business. Note down what this pay rise means to you and to them, and what are they going to get in turn as a business as a result of doing this. So it could be a case of you've achieved, you've delivered X amount of projects on time, which has meant that X amount of customers have returned and they've got great customer satisfaction scores. Above and beyond your remit, you're also doing whatever you're doing. It could be that you are mentoring other people, you're managing other people, you're taking on ownership of other people's growth, you're contributing to company-wide initiatives, you're contributing to things like a Women's Day event, for example. What are you doing above and beyond your role that's going to be really beneficial? Are there any examples of demonstrations that you're at that next level as well? So if you are that person that's managed these projects, you've got great clients returning, have you gone and sold in or upsold something to a client, for example? This could be completely irrelevant to your field, but just go with me here. So think about like how could you demonstrate everything that you're doing and some in the first instance. Document everything. Document everything into a business case, and get it all in writing. So you have to go into these meetings being ultra prepared. I would also say sometimes it's actually beneficial to submit this as like an ask to your boss in advance as well. So they feel prepared going into that meeting, because that ultimately means that you're going to be quicker to an answer or understanding where you're at, versus going in, catching them off guard, and then they need to go away and do some background work to be able to come back to you. So that can do, depending on the relationship you have with your manager and like how they like to work, it can be beneficial to give them a bit of a heads up on this side of things. The final thing that I would say is that sometimes you do need to be prepared to leave. And that can be quite a daunting thing to think about. But there are some instances where the only way, if a pay rise is that important to you, the only way you're going to get it is by leaving. And you need to be prepared to do that. You also need to be prepared sometimes that if you go in and say, you're saying externally, I could get paid X amount more, they might not be able to match that. They might not be willing to match that. And then you're kind of stuck in a point of, oh, what do I do? And I think that that's really more prevalent when people will go and interview for another job, get through to getting an offer from this job, take that offer and then take it to their boss and use it as leverage to get a pay rise. That is totally fine if you're okay with them saying no, in which case you have to take that job. So it's a risky tactic. I don't think that people should do it too often. I would say like once, maybe every few years at a push. I think I've done that once in my career. And the way that I positioned it was a great, like, it was something like 50% more of my salary. And I basically said, I don't feel ready to take this move. I don't feel ready to take this leap. I still feel like there's more that I need to do here. But it's an amazing offer that I can't necessarily look at or walk away from. And my manager at the time was so supportive and basically said, look, I want to make this work. What can we do to make it work? How do we work on a plan together? And that didn't mean an immediate match of that salary. That meant something like a bonus then, and then a path to promotion, which then triggered a pay rise, which then in turn triggered to meet that salary at some point. I think in total, it probably took 6 to 8 months to get to that. But I was so glad to do that and stay where I was and still building where I was, because there was still more work to be done and I genuinely didn't feel ready to leave. So that can work in your favor sometimes. But again, you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic of where are you at? What impact are you having? Are you actually nailing your job? Like, be really honest with yourself, because if you're not, you're probably not going to be on the best, in the best position going into that conversation and that situation. So really be honest with yourself about where are you at? What can you do to get there? And then when you go into that conversation, you got to be really, really prepared. And then if they say no, you have to be prepared to make that decision. Do you want to stay or do you want to leave? If it's a no, the biggest question that you need to ask is, if it's a no right now, is it going to turn into a yes at some point? And if so, when would that be? What's the timeline? What do I need to do to get there? Can we work on this together? Most managers will do that with you. If that's not really possible, or if it's a little bit too out of reach or whatever it might be, then you need to be prepared to step away and leave. But I do genuinely think that a lot of people accelerate in their careers by stepping into new roles at new companies every few years, 3, 4, 5 years, for example. I've certainly experienced that. I've kind of, on average, moved roles every 3 years, which has been a stepping stone every single time to get to a higher and higher and higher position. So I feel like it can work in your favor to do that sometimes. And I think that if I look back, had I stayed in the company I was at, say 3, 4 companies ago, would I be in the same position I am now? Absolutely not. So that call is all up to you, though. It's all up to you. So you've got to make that decision. But I wish you all the best of luck. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for submitting so many great questions. I feel like we really got into it. And I hope that you're finding that April and the beginning of Q2 is a massive reset moment for you too. And if there's someone that you know that you think would benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. It would mean so much to me. Thank you so much again, and see you guys next week.